you on a rainy week before us and a rainy week ahead. But despite that, our visitors and guests from the CVF are present here in the Philippines and had a rainy weekend in Tagaytay, I think. I will not mention again all the names of our guests. We'd just like to welcome you to the Philippines, and I hope that you've tasted some bit of Filipino hospitality. But I would like to make special mention of three cabinet members who are here very early this morning, who despite a very long week ahead and spending half the time in Mindanao with a newly elected president, were here in the Philippine Senate. So thank you very much, Secretary Pernia, Secretary Tugade, Secretary Alcusi, for being here today, for supporting the Climate Vulnerable Forum. These three gentlemen will bring in or have brought in their expertise and managerial and organization skills in the private sector and in the academe into government. So we're happy to have you in the cabinet of President Duterte. And I am very certain that with Secretary Pernia at the helm of the NEDA and with Secretary Tugade and his expertise in the private sector, having headed Clark before, in transport and communications, a very challenging task lays ahead of you, Secretary Art. And of course, with the expert managerial skills and organization skills of Secretary Alcusi, having come from the private sector as well, these three gentlemen will shepherd the Philippines, hopefully and confidently, into greater heights. And we're grateful that you're here today. Of course, we are grateful that our high-level officials of the CVF member countries are here today, and we would like to acknowledge as well the co-organizer of this event, the Climate Change Commission, Secretary de Guzman, Commissioner Gerlan, Commissioner Victorio, and all the members. The private sector is here too. I will no longer mention each and every one of you. Thank you, UNDP, for organizing this event with us. What really does the future hold for all of us? Nations greatly vulnerable to the ill effects of climate change. We are actually walking on thin ice. Our future is uncertain because we are facing a crisis that we cannot resolve on our own. Sea level rise threatens to submerge island nations, including our very own members of the CVF. And what are these examples? Kiribati, Marshall Islands, and the Maldives. Ocean acidification is causing irreversible damage to our coral reefs, while the sudden shifts from hot temperatures to incessant rains pose uncertainties to agriculture, greatly affecting our food security. The warming climate is now one of the most significant risks for World Heritage sites, including the Philippines, Ifugao rice terraces. Extreme rainfall and heavy flooding constantly threaten lives, livelihood, and sustainable development. And this is why we are not content with the use of the phrase well below 2 degrees Celsius goal when the Paris Agreement was being drafted. Instead, we pushed for the inclusion of the 1.5 degrees global warming limit as our main goal. It was not an easy journey during the Paris Agreement negotiations, yet we continued to move forward through the challenging path of pushing for its ratification. At this point, 22 of the 197 parties to the convention have ratified the agreement, but they only represent 1.08% of global greenhouse gas emissions, or GHG. And this is still too far from the required representation of 55% of GHG emissions for the agreement to take effect. The 2015 Paris Agreement has been hailed by many as a landmark agreement, but its aspirations will not happen on its own. This is where the role of the CVF becomes even more crucial. Allow me first to congratulate the Climate Change Commission, one of the newest agencies of government that was brought about by the enactment of the Climate Change Act in 2009. The CCCOM represented the Philippines in the CVF. It was a challenge for our country to lead the CVF during the very crucial period of crafting and negotiating the Paris Agreement. We could not have done it without the solidarity among the CVF member states and the immense support of the UNDP. And now that Ethiopia will assume the CVF presidency, I am certain that with the unequivocal support of every member, it will continue to steer the CVF towards our common goal of being the voice of reason in the climate negotiations and asserting the rights of vulnerable nations. I think it was very clear in the message of our own President Duterte when he cried for climate justice, and that is the reason why the CVF exists, to push for climate justice, to push for the developed nations to take responsibility for their actions in the past years, if not decades and centuries, and for the vulnerable nations to be able to receive both technical and financial assistance from not just the Climate Fund, but from all of these developed nations, so that we will no longer be vulnerable, so that we can do more, both mitigation and adaptation in our community efforts. Bending the global warming curve to 1.5 degrees Celsius is a moral imperative, especially for the developed nations, because it means saving lives and livelihoods of hundreds of millions of people. It means upholding the human rights of the poor and the vulnerable. It means ensuring the integrity of our ecosystems. Global warming has already breached the 1 degrees Celsius level, with unprecedented warming in the past months. We have already borne the tragedies. We've seen it, whether it was Ondoy in 2009, Sendong in 2011, Pablo in 2012, Haiyan or Yolanda in 2013. And all of these tragedies and losses from recurring impacts of extreme weather events under a 1 degrees Celsius global warming. Now we ask, how much more with higher or warmer temperatures? We actually cannot wait for the agreement to take effect before we take action. We must continue to rally our respective states and communities to take urgent climate action, because global warming will not halt as institutions and nations all over the world debate whether to ratify or not. Although we in the CVF and we in the Philippines are clearly not major emitters in the world, in fact, less than 1 degree Celsius, we cannot let our respective economies grow through the waste that caused today's climate crisis. We cannot let human society live in a world fraught with dangers. Quality of life comes with a price tag, but it is not necessarily beyond our reach. Building livable, or what Red Constantino would say, sustainable cities and communities requires good planning. More importantly, it requires a genuine commitment to the ultimate goal of putting the Earth's and our people's survival foremost over all other concerns. I am glad that we are graced with the presence of our partners in the executive, our cabinet secretaries, whose roles are crucial in the Philippines' journey towards a sustainable, low-carbon economy. Transportation Secretary Arthur Togade, Energy Secretary Al Cusi, have both shown commitment and managerial expertise during their previous stints in the private sector, and Secretary Pernia as well. And I am certain they will be our good partners in this endeavor, particularly on energy that is affordable, sustainable, and clean, and on transport that is efficient, reliable, convenient, and inexpensive. I hope our Department of Transport will be open as well to the road sharing scheme, where half the road is allocated to well-designed sidewalks for pedestrians, bike lanes, and urban gardens, and the other half for private vehicles and an organized transport system when applicable. We now enter a new era of development pursuits which challenges us to do more, to do better, to be more innovative. Delivering on our commitments to the Paris Agreement is our way of telling and showing the world that though we are vulnerable, we are not necessarily incapable. We strive for a 1.5 degrees Celsius to thrive. We can do this together. The dream of a safer world needs the cooperation of all countries, of every man, woman, and child. And if we start today, there is no promise that we will be lucky enough to see the undoing of the damage within our lifetime, but at least we leave our world with a gift of hope for a better, kinder future. Congratulations to the CVF. Today, a historic moment as the Philippines turns over the presidency to Ethiopia, whose Minister of Environment and Climate Change is present here today. Thank you. Mabuhay.